Dear Dairy. Oh, by the way, there's still a little bit here. Okay, don't have to panic. It's like I said, it's lighter underneath, and so it'll darken as it grows in. It's very weird how that works. So, couple of things. First of all, and foremost, these are ginseng candy, and I use that word, candy, very lightly, because it tastes like bitter and dirt. There is a little bit of sweet to it, and I suspect that's to try to cut the bitter. So it makes me wonder just how bitter that would be if there was no sweet. But they're good for the throat while you're working on voice acting stuff. So otherwise, when you start getting way down low, your voice starts doing this kind of, when you're trying to talk in a really deep voice, it just gets a little difficult to do stuff. So got to be careful with that. What have I got to tell you? Couple of things, like I was saying. The first, well, the second thing, because I already told you about the ginseng stuff, is I was playing solitaire yesterday, which I enjoy doing. I like playing solitaire. It's fun. I accidentally clicked something incorrectly on my thing. When you click to open a new game, the menu opens up and it's got something, and then I don't remember what the bottom selection is, but it might be leaderboards or something like that. And then the top one is new game, and in between them is multiplayer. Now, I admit I'm not an expert at solitaire, but I am relatively decent at it, and I'm pretty sure it's not a multiplayer kind of game. I have heard of multiplayer solitaire. My shirt is untucked and it's driving me crazy. I have heard of multiplayer solitaire, and it's like, I don't know, it's just bizarre. I can't wrap my brain around that concept. It's like honest politician, or the phrase, I'm here from the government and I'm here I'm here from the government and I'm here to help you. No, that's wrong too. It's, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. That's the line. I know the word promise tried to sneak in there somewhere, and that's because I was kind of trying not to say the other one. That is another common one of those, phrases that never believe, like, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. And that is, I promise I won't come in your mouth. So, moving on. Normally I try to keep things a little bit PG, but sometimes it just... So, multiplayer solitaire makes no sense. Military intelligence, jumbo shrimp, that kind of thing. Earlier today, there was a tweet from Richard Castle, Nathan Fillion, and he had tweeted the question, if you could go back to any point in time, when would you go? And I started to say, just far enough back that I could make some very subtle long-term investments, so that when it got to this day and age, that they would be worth not an insane amount of money, the kinds of amounts of money that are going to catch people's attention, but just enough that I could be like, okay, I can buy a house, buy some land and a house and a dog and a boyfriend. And I'm not going to buy a boyfriend, but still, maybe a horse, not as a boyfriend, just buy a couple of horses that my boyfriend and I can ride with our dog running, or dogs, plural, running along beside us, laughing through the fields all day. Okay, getting a little bit gay now. That's the level of gay, not the boyfriend. Last thing that I have, and this is the part that's going to take the longest, because I figured, well, I didn't figure, it just kind of came to me earlier because a friend of mine, Scotty, was saying that he got called for jury duty, or we were talking about jury duty. And I was saying, I love jury duty. Now, I've only been called once that I actually got selected, for jury duty, and I figured, okay, this would make a really good story for Dear Dairy. So here you go. Here was my one time serving on a jury. At the time, I was probably 26, maybe 27. And I always wore a big black leather duster and a black leather fedora and black leather fingerless driving gloves. And I wore a lot of black and a lot of leather. And so I go into underneath it, I was wearing fairly, upstanding citizen type clothing, but I was still wearing all that stuff on top of it. So I walk into the courtroom, and we're up in the jury box, and they're going through, and the two different lawyers are going through and selecting people that they want to dismiss without cause, which basically means, no thank you, you can go. And they don't have to give any reason for it. Now, each of them has a set number of people that they can dismiss without cause. Aside from that, then there's, dismissal with cause. Now, you have to have a good reason to dismiss this person. Maybe you feel that they are going to be, biased against your client, that they're not going to be able to suspend their own judgments and weigh the case based solely on the facts and not, use their own past, their own history, their own, prejudices, and allow that to influence their decision on the case. You have to decide the case based on the facts in evidence. You also have to use your own... It's complicated. Anyway, so we got through the selection process, and I had been selected as one of the 12 jurors. Well, 13, but I was not the 13th juror. 13th juror is just in case one of the jurors gets sick, 13th juror has to fill in. So by the end of the first day, they had finished the selection. They said, okay, everybody go home. We'll hear the case tomorrow. Don't talk about it. Of course, we didn't know anything about the case, but we still weren't allowed to talk about it. We knew that it was a DUI case, but that's all we knew. So the next morning, we all come back, and we all sit down, and basically the first half of the day, we sat there and we listened to the two sides go back and forth about stuff that, looking at the expressions on these people's faces, they had been through this a couple of times. And they looked very, very kind of, oh God, not again, kind of thing. And some of the elements of this story were very, very weird. Like I said, it was a DUI case, kind of, but not really. The young lady whose name I have since forgotten, this was several years ago, she was not accused of driving while under the influence. She was accused of operating a vehicle under the influence, which is a little bit more specific. And there were a couple of witnesses. There was one of her coworkers, a guy named Jose. I think, I can't remember his last name, but it was Jose. Who was a coworker that she had, a long time ago, been having an affair with. He's married, by the way. Or was. He was at the time of the trial. Anyway, there was a fireman who was one of the ones who was responding to the call. And there was a police officer who was also responding to the call. Anyway, so they called up, and they have these pictures of the scene, the segment of the street. It's this cul-de-sac. Basically, they were at a company party at Pizza Hut, and she got way drunk. I mean, holy crap, was she drunk. Like, she was blowing .03, on the thing. I mean, we're talking, woman, you are to, alcohol poisoning kind of stuff. Was it .03 or was it .3? It was one of the, when I heard the number, I was like, you shouldn't be alive right now. Maybe that's why she looks so bored. I don't know. Anyway, so she decided, okay, I need to go home. Now, she was in no condition to drive whatsoever, and Jose knew this. She asked him, would you please drive me home? Now, he put his bicycle, which he had ridden from where he lived over to he put it in the back of her truck and was going to drive her back to her place. get his bike out, and ride back to his house. Now, partway there, this is all from his testimony, partway there, he's like, oh man, I know what this is going to look like. I don't want to deal with this again. And so he took her to a neighborhood he used to live in that he knew was safe. And he basically parked her truck on the side of this cul-de-sac and said, look, this area is safe. Sleep it off and go home in the morning. I am out of here. Bye. Grabs his bicycle and takes off, leaving her there in the back seat. Well, about 3 o'clock in the morning, one of the people who lived in the neighborhood, they hear this truck running. It's been running for a long time, and it's, shut up, I know. And it's finally starting to wake people up. Like, why is there a vehicle? Because it's never driven off. It's one of those persistent sounds that you're like, wait a minute, that, and that little nugget of logic sort of germinates and blossoms into a, what the hell is going on out there kind of thing. So somebody got up and they went and they looked out through the window, and there's this woman passed out behind the wheel of her truck with the engine running. She's just sitting there. So they call the fire department and the cops. Cops show up. The fire department shows up and pulls their truck into the, across the end of the cul-de-sac so that if her car starts moving, it won't drive off through the intersection. Apparently some kind of standard procedure or something. And they had these pictures of the area where the car was parked. Now, because of the angle this thing was shot at, when the fireman drew a little rectangle on the picture to say, well, her SUV was parked here. I'm like, do you realize how big that square is in that thing? Because, I mean, it's just a small square he drew on the thing, but from the angle it shot it, because the camera angle is shooting down the street, this square represents an area that's a house and a half wide. I'm like, her SUV ain't that big. Hell, your fire truck isn't as long as this square would be. Because the scale was just off. Anyway, so Jose maintains that he parked it, close to the curb. The fireman said that it was, easily 2 or 3 feet out from the curb. And Jose's like, no, I didn't do that. I didn't park it there. I wouldn't have parked it there. And one of the things that they asked the fireman, and said, why is this, I mean, how many of these cases do you respond to every year? I mean, he's like, probably 1,800, emergency cases or something, people in, in a vehicle that nobody knows what's going on with them. It's like, why does this one stick out in your memory so much? It's like, because she wasn't wearing any pants, and everybody in the jury box was like, say what? Wait a minute, say what? Every woman on the jury immediately, towards Jose, and I'm like, wait a minute, we don't know what happened. So we ultimately wind up hearing the whole, all of the case, and we get sent back to the jury room to deliberate. We get back there, and the first thing that comes to light is the fact that no one in this room knows what the hell we're supposed to do. And that really bothered me. I was like, wait a minute, why am I the only person who understands what the jury is supposed to do? One guy sitting at the far end of the table said, not at the end of the table, but right next to the end of the table, said, let's just say she's guilty so we can get out of here. And I was like, seriously? I mean, I'm not much of a tattletale usually, but man, that guy, I would, And I was like, sir, what if you were the one sitting out there? Would you want a bunch, and you'll have to pardon my phrasing on this, but this is what I said. I said, would you want a bunch of lazy fucks in here who care more about their own schedules than seeing justice done to simply declare you guilty because they don't have time to do their civic duty? And he was like, well, it's just, I said, it's a yes or no question. He's like, no. I said, then don't do it to her. And at that point, everybody's kind of like, oh, okay. And they're like, well, what are we supposed to do? I said, okay, the first thing we need to do is we need to elect a foreman. This is going to be the person who's going to basically act as our liaison between the court officers and everything. If we have a question, the foreman goes and talks to whoever. That'll also be the person who reads out the ruling if we have another ruling, but the verdict that we come up with, if we come up with one. And they're like, well, why don't you do it? I'm like, no. And they're like, why not? You clearly know what we're supposed to do. I said, I understand what we're supposed to. So when I walked into that courtroom and you looked over and you saw me, what was the first thing that went through your mind? And they were like, okay. I said, right. I'm clad in black leather from head to toe. I am not the person you would have chosen to be, the foreman. And the woman at the end of the table said, fine, I'll do it. I was like, perfect. And they're like, okay, so what do we do? I said, right now we take a vote and we see who feels what. Are we leaning towards guilty or not guilty? It was a perfect split right down the middle. 6 guilty, 6 not guilty. I was like, this is awesome. I found it really fascinating. We spent the rest of the afternoon deliberating back and forth. In the process, every single person reversed their decision so that the other 6 were now saying guilty and the other 6 were now saying not guilty. And it was hysterical to me. And so we were just like, we can't make a decision. And she's like, I want to know, he must have taken advantage of her. I'm like, why must he have taken? Well, she didn't have any pants on. I said, so? And she's like, well, he must have done something to her. I said, not necessarily. She's like, well, what else could have happened? I said, have you ever been that drunk? And she's like, no, I have. And given the fact that they were at Pizza Hut, they don't serve hard liquor at Pizza Hut. It's really crap beer and stuff like that. So either she snuck in her own booze or she drank a lot of beer to get that drunk. And you push that much beer down your gullet, you're gonna wake up in the middle of the night and have to pee. And if you're that drunk, you're not going to be able to stand up or squat or whatever. You'll probably pull your jeans down, and because they found her jeans in the back seat. You're going to pull your jeans down as best you can and kind of try to brace yourself against the truck to squat and everything. It ain't going to work. I promise you. You don't have the coordination at that level. You're going to wind up peeing all over your pants. Now, are you going to pull them back up? Remember that you're drunk. You're really freaking drunk. Are you going to pull your pants back up and climb into your very nice truck and drive home? Or, with urine-soaked jeans? Or are you going to think, since the bottom of the window is way up here, nobody will be able to see that I'm not wearing pants. So I'll just take them off and I'll throw them in the back seat. I'll just run into the house later on and I'll come back and get these. That is drunk logic. That is perfectly reasonable. She was, well, maybe. I said, maybe? Could it have happened that way? And she's like, well, yes. I said, now, what did Judge Hubert say? Judge Hubert was the judge, obviously. What did he say about, circumstantial evidence? She said, if you can come up with a logical reason why it would have happened or could have happened a different way that leads towards not guilty, that's the way we have to go. I said, then that's the way we have to go. And so that means that Jose didn't take advantage of her. And I'm willing to believe that he didn't. Technically, we have to believe that he didn't. Anyway, so we go in, and they're like, we are just back and forth. We can't come to a decision. And I said, look, she is not being accused of driving anywhere. She's being accused of operating the vehicle. What we need to know is, what is the definition of operating a vehicle? What constitutes operation? I mean, if somebody else starts a vehicle and you are unconscious and they put you in the driver's seat and you are out cold and somebody finds you sitting in the driver's seat of a running vehicle, are you operating that vehicle? I mean, my guess is no, but she could have started it. She could have started the vehicle, and if she did, is that operating? Yes. So what we need to know is we need to know what constitutes operating while under the influence. Or operating. Not leave under the influence out of it. Because no one saw her move that vehicle. They only saw her passed out behind the wheel. That's the only thing that is fact. Anyway. That's why I was maintaining we have to find her not guilty, because nobody saw her operate that vehicle. All they saw was somebody passed out behind the wheel. That's all anybody saw. So we declared a hung jury, and we went outside, and I said, they're going to ask us if they could repeat the evidence or, explain it. When we sent out a request for the definition of operating the vehicle, the bailiff came back and said, we're not going to tell you that. And I was like, really? Oh, that's interesting. Okay. And everybody in the jury room was like, what's going on? I'm like, this is why I love jury duty. God, it's cool. So with the evidence that we had, with the data we had, we could not come to a solid verdict. We were just split. We went out and they said, if we give you more time or we repeat the evidence, are you going to be able to come to a decision? And the foreman lady, she looked back and we were all like, oh, we're just going to keep going around. She's like, no, Your Honor. And he's like, then I have no choice but to declare a hung jury and you're dismissed with thanks. And we were done. That was it. It was that one day. And we were talking, they said, feel free to hang around because I'm sure the lawyers will have questions for you. And I went up talking to the prosecutor and I told him, I said, these pictures, no, that rectangle is bigger than the fire engine. You can't, So what you need to do is you need to get a top-down shot. This was before Google Maps. Okay. I said, if you can get a helicopter or something, he said, what kind of a budget do you think I have? I said, I don't know, man. I'm just telling you that angle of that picture, give a kid in the neighborhood a camera, pay him $50, 10, 20, whatever, buy him a freaking ice cream cone, have him climb up on the roof of the house and shoot a picture down at the street. That's the only way you're going to get the perspective you need. Because otherwise it's way off. And he's like, okay, all right, I'll think about that. Good. And so he leaves. I wound up walking out to the parking lot, the parking garage across the street with the defense attorney, and we were talking back and forth. And I told him everything that happened while we were in the jury room. And he was like, oh my God. And I'm like, what? He's like, I almost dismissed you without cause. I saw you walk in that door and I thought, oh God, this guy's a freaking hard ass. I am never going to win if he's on the jury. He said, I almost dismissed you without cause. I said, you'd better be glad you didn't, because I'm the only one who kept that jury from just saying, screw it, declare her guilty, let's go home. And he's like, that's good to know. I said, yes, it is. Just books and covers, my friend. Books and covers. And here we are at 22.5 minutes, quite possibly the longest Dear Dairy that I have done. So I'm going to let you guys go because this is going to take forever to process and upload and encode and whatever, blah, 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 everything else. So maybe I'll every now and again I'll toss in some stories and see if I can entertain you guys with tales from or whatever. So until next time, be careless, but don't break the law.